I want to call the August 30th, 2018 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. This is a called meeting. We have one item on the agenda that we're going over today. Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Bridgemore Phase 3, 20.8 acres, 29 lot, Zone R-1, OSR, Benchmark Associates Incorporated, applicant.
This phase of Bridgemore is on the north portion of the overall Bridgemore development. This particular phase has 29 house lots, and the preliminary plat, the construction plans for this were approved pretty much about a year ago, August 17th, 2017. And since that time, they've been working on putting in the required public improvements. This item in the field was not quite ready for the last meeting of the Planning Commission, but the contractors made a lot of progress in the field and has had some favorable weather for this time of year. We've had more rain than we typically have, so the field items are generally in a good condition. This particular item is there's three things that we'll need to take action on. There's two variance requests from the subdivision regulations, and then once we take action on those separately, then there's the plat itself. So if it's all right with you, I'll just take the first variance, and we'll just act on these concurrently. The first one is pretty minor. It's dealing with the size of paper that's required to be submitted with final plats. Actually, in our subdivision regulations, and this is something we're going to address with a text amendment sometime pretty soon, we actually talk about the size of the paper that's being submitted, and that really stems from an old requirement from the Knox County Register of Deeds, so that we had, something in a regulation that would require people to submit a certain size sheet, and that is no longer applicable. The Register of Deeds, of course, has gone to a more electronic process, and the 18 by 24 is not a set requirement from them anymore. So the applicants submitted their plans on a 24 by 36, and that actually is, from a staff's perspective, it's preferable, while we're still using paper, because it's more legible, and then you can sometimes consolidate more information and end up with fewer overall sheets in the submittal. So with this particular variance request, the staff would recommend approval with the understanding that the logic behind that is it's not a requirement anymore with the 18 by 24, and then also we'll be pursuing a text amendment in the near future to address this. So with that, we would recommend approval of the first variance.
I'd move for approval, subject to the consideration you mentioned.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Then the second variance is dealing with the placement of street light supports, and this is an image that the applicant provided staff that kind of illustrates some things. The current lighting provisions are an appendix in our subdivision regulations. It's called a Guide to Residential Street Lighting, and in there's a specification that the light supports are to be 10 feet from the edge of pavement. That was a safety, reasons for that. What the applicant is requesting is to allow the supports to be 3 feet from the back of curb. These posts will be breakaway posts, and what they're trying to do is match what is in Phase 1 of Bridgemore, and they're actually, when we went out to look at them, they're closer than 3 feet. They're almost right at the back of the curb. You have the 3-foot grass strips in both Phase 1 and Phase 2. In Phase 2, a different developer did place their light poles to meet the 10-foot requirement. So in Phase 2, you do have the poles on the outer side of the sidewalk. This is something that, with the change in our grass strip width requirements recently, we've gone from the 3-foot minimum to a 6-foot minimum. So it's something that we probably need to think about as part of potentially an amendment to the subdivision regulations to think about how we want to address light pole placement and utilities in relation to that change in the green space requirement. It's true that the poles in Phase 2 are probably 10 feet from the edge of pavement, but they did have the 3-foot grass strip in that phase, and now in this phase they've applied the 6-foot grass strip, so that means the poles are further back from the street, more into people's property potentially. So given the fact that Phase 1 does have poles that are within the space being requested at this time, and that we will be revisiting this with some recommendation for a text amendment in the future, the staff would not be opposed to this. I mean, obviously, I think it would be preferable to have the poles further away from the road, but you do have, particularly in Phase 1, you've already got a bunch of all the elm trees that are in that 3-foot space, and you also have mailboxes, neither of which obviously are breakaway. So they're actually more, immovable than these posts. If somebody were to hit one of the light post supports, it would probably be definitely more forgiving than hitting one of the trees or a brick mailbox. So I'm not sure if safety is a goal here, that there's other things out there that would present probably a worse hazard than the light poles. So that's really up for you all to discuss and think about. But I mean, we're not opposed to it since you already do have some in there that are at this distance from the road. But that's something to maybe discuss. I don't know what your all's thoughts are on that.
Anybody have any questions?
Mark, what are you thinking about as far as a text amendment in the future? Is there any particular design scenario that you're figuring that might actually work a little bit better than what we have, being that we've basically if you've got 18-inch drive-over curbs plus 6 feet of grass plus 5 feet of sidewalk,
You got 11,
now you're
12.
11 and a half feet,
Yeah,
or 12 and a half feet, actually technically from the edge of asphalt.
yeah.
So, and you're getting your lights so far away from the asphalt.
Not really,
that
really illuminating the street, which was the whole intent.
which was the idea. So I'm just wondering the way our profile now looks.
Yeah.
I mean, where is the optimum placement?
Well, I think it would be within the 6-foot
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
grass strip. They're not going to be that frequently spaced, but I think those and the street trees, that would be the most logical place for.
Are your street lights tied in with your transformers? Are they direct wired to the transformers, or they have their own circuit?
They're directly tied.
So your transformers on every other lot typically. So typically your street lights are on maybe every 150 to 200 feet is about what your spacing of your street lights would be.
I think so.
Tell us first who you are and give us an
I'm sorry.
address.
Billy Fulgham with Fulgham McIndone Associates, 10330 Hardin Valley Road, Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm the civil engineer on the project.
Before you answer a question, the red is where they want it to be, and
Yes,
the blue
ma'am.
is where we've required it to be?
Well, yeah, the blue's where it would be based on the cross-section that we have now, with the
Okay,
6
thank
foot
you.
and the 5 foot. So it's a little bit further than
It's
what
further than the
historically.
requirement. The blue one is.
Well, for a lot of years, we had a 3-foot grass strip and then 4 feet of sidewalks.
Yes.
And as both the
That's
grass
right.
strip and the sidewalks have grown, it's now pushing everything further back. And conceivably, it's actually pushing it outside the right-of-way, which is not a big deal because there's an easement back there.
Yeah.
But ideally, that's not the best place as far as illumination goes for those lights. And I'm just thinking, not only for Bridgemore in this particular phase, but how do we address this in the future, being that we have some different requirements than we've historically had, and what the optimum placement is for safety and for illumination.
No, one thing you guys could consider is the state of Virginia, the Virginia Department of Transportation, they actually own all the right-of-ways, is from my understanding. So in a subdivision, like where the town owns that road, my understanding is the Department of Transportation owns it. And they've developed some low-speed standards, low-speed roadway standards. So, like this 10-foot away, and there's a lot of other requirements that are really higher speed roadway requirements. And a subdivision is it's really better for a low speed.
You're talking 30 mile an hour or below.
Yeah, and for example, on a high speed, like the curbs that we have, you wouldn't want that on a high speed section anyway.
You're saying a high-speed section, if you have illumination, you definitely want to put that further back from the edge of the pavement.
Yeah, but
Makes sense.
Yeah,
When
lower
somebody's going
speed.
faster, right.
Yeah.
but
So if
that's
you
a
guys do
trade-off.
consider it, there's a very good standards there for
That's a
that.
trade-off even further away, because if it's a higher speed, you still want illumination of the road.
Well, I think what we're really
And, but
thinking,
then the poles are higher.
I think ultimately all this was promulgated by the fact that if somebody hits the post,
Yeah.
they're trying to keep these as many hazards out of the right of way as possible. Obviously, in neighborhoods, we've talked about the other hazards, trees and mailboxes. We've got a lot of hazards within the right of way that could definitely be an obstruction if somebody left the asphalt or the travel lanes.
Correct.
We're just thinking about how we deal with this. What our goal is, if we grant you a variance, is we want to make it an even playing field for everybody in the future. And that's what I was trying to do, is initiate a little conversation, is, where is there an optimum location? And if so, is that something we could embrace tonight, or is it something that takes a little more further study? And I'm not trying to hold you guys up
Yeah.
by any means. We're just trying to figure out how do we deal with this moving forward.
Yeah, with any of that, I would recommend you guys do reference that low-speed subdivision standard that they have.
So right now, Mark, do we just have across the board, lighting
Yeah.
has to be 10 feet outside any
Well,
edge of asphalt in
It
public
would-
right of ways?
It would be applying to local streets because that's our residential
That's
street
right. We really don't have
lightings.
any other. Any other streets, whether it's an arterial
there'll
or
be more-
would be something that the town of Farragut's jurisdiction would be.
Yeah, that or LCUB or just a street safety kind of lighting system like you have along Campbell Station and
Right.
Kingston Pike, where it's for the traveler's safety, to illuminate. Those are completely out of the realm of these
Right. Out of this type of
guidelines.
design.
Yeah. These were really created many years ago because we had some subdivisions where they were just, putting in lights and they were, extremely bright and were glaring, and it caused a lot of problems with the residents that were nearby. And so we developed some standards basically to try to, have something in place that would control that a little bit better. And that's kind of how all that came about. The 10-foot, I'm sure, was in there because of just a factor of safety, distance from the traveled way. But we do have the requirement for the breakaway posts in the guidelines as well.
And Billy, you're proposing just splitting the difference in the 6 feet,
Yeah,
the
just
6
put it
foot
in the
median,
middle.
putting it obviously 3 feet outside the back of curb.
Frankly, we probably need to redo our lighting standards anyway, overall, because of the
Different kinds of
move
lights
to
now.
all LEDs.
Right.
They're just a brighter product, and our standards are still, they have an accommodation for that, but they probably still need to be adjusted somewhat.
We need to pay some attention to what the light does to the residents' homes that are in there. It's
Yes, right.
They-
And I think that was
I've heard
one of
more
their
complaints about
concerns.
that
Is
than anything
you
else.
put it so far back, it's not only is it
But
not
lighting the
illuminating the street, but it's, kind of illuminating the front door.
Yeah.
And I looked at a number of other subdivisions in the town, like McKinley Station and Briarstone, and they're pretty far back. I mean, I don't know why, but.
Well, they've had
some
to
of
meet
them
that 10-foot requirement, that setback requirement
Well,
is part
that,
of
but
it.
some of them look like they're 15-plus feet back, so I don't know.
Well, a lot of it may be dictated how LCUB sets those
Where the
transformers
It
on the
is.
poles.
Utilities.
Because
Yes.
all those have an access door on them.
It is.
And you can't, all of a sudden, if your access door is facing one particular direction, you've got to adjust LCUB is ultimately the one that kind of controls a lot of this, with what Billy's talking about, with these lights that direct tie in to the transformers. They're not on a separate meter.
Yep, that's exactly right, because you'll see those next to the transformer, the lights. Yep.
So
Billy,
we'll see
does-
all of this again.
Billy, does the standard you were mentioning
Yeah.
mention placement, but it also mention the use of breakaway poles?
To be honest with you, I'm sure it does. The reason where I found it was in the use of guardrails in subdivisions. And actually trying to argue that it wasn't applicable to have a guardrail in a subdivision because of the low speed. It actually, they found, had studies that it could be hazardous. So I knew that they had those standards, and I would assume that all the lighting information is in those standards also.
Billy, can you do me a favor, if that's easier to access, because you've already done the search, can you send that
Yeah.
site to,
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah,
the
sure
same
will.
thing.
You talking about
Yeah.
the Virginia
Mhm.
DOT,
See what
or
we
Virginia
can
DOT
use
version?
from there.
Yeah.
dig around for 20 minutes to
Yeah.
find it, but
No,
that
no,
might
I
help for
haven't.
you to just forward
Yeah,
it to
that
us.
would be good.
It might help us
Yeah.
wordsmith some of this future text amendments.
Yeah, it's a PDF.
Okay.
That'd be good.
I have a question, and I'm not sure, I don't really know how all of this works. This brings it into the right-of-way, and I know that there's certain things that are our responsibility in the right-of-way once they become publicly dedicated right-of-way. Is this one of them, or is this continue to be the neighborhood's responsibility?
The plat should address that. The plat should address the lighting and with it, that make that the HOA's responsibility.
Yeah, that should be in the, I think it's in our guidelines too.
I think another thing you might want to consider in your detail there, you're at 24 feet to the dimension where the light pole should be. I mean, the light pole could basically, do you want it outside the right of way and in people's private property?
Well, we've got a lot
Yeah.
of stuff in that easement. I mean, there's other things in that easement that
No,
I
we're
don't think's
saying we
created
won't pull it
problems. We've actually had sometimes sidewalks and walking trails back in those easements.
Yeah, that's
No,
true.
we're not concerned about that. But to answer your question, are you guys agreeing with what Louise was saying, that you understand this is HOA has responsibility of even though it's within the public right of way, the HOA will be responsible for the maintenance of the lights. Obviously, with whatever agreement that you have with LCUB.
Right.
And typically, I think that's done in a plat note.
Yeah.
In your final plat.
I don't know if you put that on one of your notes or not, Bill.
Make sure it's in
Benny.
there.
That is not a note that's not on our notes, no.
Well, that may have predated what we're talking about tonight, because prior to what we're talking about tonight,
They were
I
outside
think that's
the
you,
right-of-way.
Ed. Prior to tonight, you were outside the right of way, so it was really kind of a non-issue. But tonight, assuming we grant a variance for this, you'll be back within the right of way. So, I assume you haven't filed your plat yet. That's what we're approving
One of the
right here as part of
stipulations
this.
of the
So,
variance.
We've
hopefully
not-
you haven't started collecting all your signatures.
Oh, they're all collected. We were hoping to secure signatures and record right away. That would be something that could be easily added to the HOA documents, though.
Has Tom already reviewed this phase
They
of the HOA?
sent me a draft and I forwarded it to him, but I'm sure he hasn't looked at it yet. 'Cause
I mean,
just got it
that's a
yesterday.
publicly recorded instrument. I mean, that carries as much weight being
Yeah.
recorded at the courthouse as the plat does. So,
Yeah, if you could make sure that's addressed in the covenants, that'd be
not a
fine.
problem. That's not a
Yeah,
problem.
With me, if it's up to you
yeah,
all.
I'd be fine. Louise, does that address your concern? You just make sure the taxpayer doesn't want to pick up the tab on fixing their lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We just need to make
Square it
sure
away.
that if that's where we're going to address it, that we're assured that it's being addressed, and not something you could take back out of your HOA.
Right. responsibilities or obligations.
People like to, we HOA people like to go back and amend our
Take 2/3
covenants
vote
every
and
so
change the
often.
HOA agreement.
We've had some private HOA roads that we've actually had to adopt as public roads before.
Yeah.
So,
A
yeah,
bunch of those.
Yes, we hope we don't have any more.
so that could be part of your action on this item is, that direction for the covenants, I think.
Okay.
Any more questions or comments?
Probably need to get his name.
No.
I think I'll let Louise take a stab at this one.
Get your name and address.
I'm Benny Mormon with Benchmark Associates, 10308 Hardin Valley Road.
Thank you. Does anybody have a motion for
I know
the,
what you're talking about. You have a better.
Oh, don't look at me. I just don't want to craft the motion. I'm trying to figure out how to get all this in there. So I'll grant a motion to grant the variance from the placement of streetlight supports as provided in the guide to residential street lighting. The variance would be approximately, what do we think? It's about a 6-foot variance, 7-foot variance, something like that. And then typically we try to put a hardship in there within the variance. Madam Chairman, do you want a hardship being in that motion?
Standard 6-foot.
Okay.
Grass strip.
Due to, Mark, I hope you're keeping up with this. Due to the somewhat recent requirements of the expanded 6-foot grass medians as well as 5-foot sidewalks.
And use of breakaway pole.
And of use of a breakaway pole as well as addressing this in your covenant restrictions to be recorded and reviewed by the town, that the HOA will accept responsibility of the lights.
now, does that go, that goes more as one of the subject twos as opposed to the part of the variance?
That's part of the
Well, the variance, since we're bringing it back into the right of way, we probably ought to tie that into the variance
Yeah.
rather than into the final plat.
Okay.
Right.
But we could address it there too.
Well,
If
Yeah.
we wanted to.
Probably a good idea. Okay.
I'll second that.
Do you have it, Mark?
Probably. Yeah.
I think everybody understands the intent of what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
and so it makes light placement makes sense.
I like it on paper.
Me too.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, we'll move on to the,
The plat
Plat
itself.
itself.
Yeah. Now, as far as what was sent to you all earlier, the only thing that's still outstanding on the plat would be, and a couple of these aren't really related to the plat itself directly, but the signatures being provided, number one. 4 is just something that would have to be done that could potentially hold up building permits. As I mentioned earlier, 7 is again another thing that's going to be tied to building permits, at least as far as the staff's recommending, and that's the covenants. And those have been sent to Tom. Like I say, we need to make sure that the lighting's addressed in there. I think that's pretty much as far as the plat itself goes. Is all that's lacking is just obtaining the signatures on the plat at this point. We do have the letters of credit now. The notes that we asked for have been provided on the plat. So the staff would recommend approval, subject to obtaining all signatures and ensuring that the other items noted are addressed at the appropriate time as outlined by the staff here. Which would
Benny, do
be
you have any questions on any of these
building
subject twos?
No, and all the signatures are required with the exception of the town engineer and the secretary's signature.
I was by there today, and there's still utility work going on from LCUB and KUB. Are you far enough along with that they are willing to sign off on it?
They have signed off.
They have, okay.
Okay.
And Mark, as far as you know, there's nothing as far as the engineering department?
Well, they just need to get the stop signs installed. Is the thing that
Is that a punch list item?
I heard. That's on that, engineering,
At number
completing
8.
engineering. So maybe that's still remaining 1 and 8.
For y'all's information, I've been advised that the stop signs will be picked up at 8 o'clock in the morning and installed tomorrow.
Now you need a little rain to get your grass to grow, don't you?
It's growing pretty well.
A little dry spell now. I was hoping to get some more today. I'm not sure we're going
Yeah.
to get it.
So as far as you know from Daryl, that's,
Well, you could say subject to items 1 and 8,
okay.
if you're comfortable with that. Like I said, 4 and 7 are really tied to the building permit. we're not going to hold them up on the plat for that, but
Okay.
it's just there kind of to remind them and have it in writing so that, it could hold up your building permits if you get to that point. You don't have these things wrapped up
So you're looking at 1 and 8 as the subject twos.
on the
that-
plat, yes, that's
On the
right.
plat.
Yeah.
Can we get, I'm not privy to what 1 and 8 are from engineering, I'm sorry, could,
1 is obtaining all signatures, and 8 is completing any remaining engineering punch list items.
Do we want to include a number 9, just for clarity, that the light poles will be addressed in the covenants as being a responsibility of the HOA? Do we need to put that in there, or
think just
does number 7?
Modify number 7. yeah.
Number 7, but that, we were just going to do subject to 1 and 8.
Right.
Do you want to do subject to 1, 7, and 8, and modifying? I feel like I'm getting complicated here as soon as
My
I say
recommendation would
that.
be to add, make sure that, I was going
1
to say,
and
that
8.
may add the language like we did with the variance to the covenant discussion approval of number 7 when it
Yeah,
comes
number
up for the
7.
building permit.
I think the last discussion probably covers that,
Okay,
because they'll have to
okay, just want to make sure.
address that in the covenants.
Okay.
So that would be my opinion of it. but-
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
None.
Move for approval of the final plat, subject to items 1 and 8.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? In that case, the August 30th, 2018 special call meeting of the Planning Commission is adjourned.